Hello YouTube, this is Froogle, and today we're taking a look at the Flyjsim 737-200. Now I have a confession, I've been putting this video off. I actually got the aircraft, I think, late May. Immediately prior to release, Jack Sketches from Flyjsim sent this across to me, and I've been meaning to review it, and I keep on putting it off because, in short, it's actually very, very complex. It's bordering on study sim. They have hundreds of pages of documentation with this, not quite full Boeing documentation like you'd get with PNDG, for example, but very, very complex, very, very detailed, and despite it being just the 737, which I'm sure many of us have a lot of experience with, thanks to the PMDG 737 NGX, it's actually very, very different. You'll see when we get in the flight deck in a minute. Things look very, very familiar, but they're not. As you start to look around the cockpit and do stuff, things get very, very different very quickly. Now, Flyjsim is Jack Sketches. It's Jack and another chap whose name escapes me. I should probably actually have it in the manual here. Give me 1 second to look it up. The aircraft is primarily developed by Jack, and he had some help from Joe Vermeulen. Joe did the primary flight testing, research, quality control, and documentation, with Jack doing pretty much everything else. Jack is quite well known within the X-Plane community. He also freelances for other teams as well, doing the flight models on Flight Factors aircraft, like the 757, and I think the 777 as well. But anyway, this is his labor of love, the follow-on to his 727 that we reviewed on this very channel a short while ago, or not that short while ago, but a while ago, about a year ago actually. Anyway, 737-200, so it's a classic Boeing, doesn't have an FMC, doesn't have GPS, although you can fit them. If you have, let me click on this INS here, if you have SIVA for X-Plane, then that gives you a Delco Carousel IV-A INS simulation that works alongside this aircraft. We're not going to use that, we're going to do everything but using the steam gauges, so VOR navigation all the way, with some NDBs and ADFs and all that good stuff. Anyway, looking at the outside, as we always do, first of all, it is really well modeled. I gotta say, in some respects, it's actually a little bit basic. You know, if I zoom in on these textures, it looks like we're just magnifying an image, you know, rather than zooming into a 3D model. But, you know, kudos to Jack. He's the only guy that did this, and for what it is, it's just fine. You know, you're not supposed to be spending that much time outside looking at the plane anyway. The majority of your time is going to be spent inside. I gotta say as well, I'm not a big fan of 737-200s. I love 737s, but this classic engine here, ugly. It's just ugly to me. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I know a lot of you actually love this. I enjoy flying this a great deal. I enjoy sitting in the flight deck, pressing the buttons and making this do things immensely. It is a huge challenge, which again is why I've been putting this off for so long. So apologies for Jack for taking my sweet time in getting this done. Let's get into the flight deck. He's set up a number of preset views. Now, I have set the field of view here to what he recommends. If we go into options, you can see here field of view is best at 75 degrees. So I've set it at 75 degrees. This is a 75 degree view. I don't like that either. I like that. I like to zoom out and be able to see all the engine instruments, my flaps indicator, which is about 95 to 100 degrees field of view. But if I were to set the field of view like that, it actually makes the rest of his views not that good. He's got a full set of views built in, which are bound to the X-Plane view system on the numeric keypad. So the number 4 key is that home view. Number 5 moves you across to the autoflight system. Number 6 puts you in the co-pilot seat. Number 7 puts you on the first section of the overhead. 8 moves you up, 9 moves you up some more, and then number 1 drops you down here to look at the weather radar, which is fully functioning, the center console, and of course the radios and navigation radios. Now, as I said, if I change my field of view, I can actually show you what it looks like. If I go ahead and pop in here to the options and set up a field of view that I like to fly with on a widescreen monitor, it's actually not very nice. It works. That's normally what I fly with, 105-ish. Okay, that's much better for me, but if I go and look at the overhead now, we're kind of zoomed out and you can't really see it. You see that? It's good. I mean, everything is there, but it's hard to perceive the detail. So we're not going to fly that way. Plus, you also get a bit of a fisheye effect, as I'm sure you can see as I move this camera around when I use my default field of view. So we're going to set it up to Jack's recommendation of 75 degrees, which means whenever I jump back into this pilot in command view, you're going to see me zooming the view out. So apologies for lots of zooming like that every time we get back in the seat. Anyway, let's continue with the options here. Jack's got the customary Flyjsim panels that are accessed from the left-hand side of the screen here. So on options, we can set the aircraft for cold and dark, or engines running, set the time to be in Zulu, change the weights and measures to kilograms. Another caveat, I'm doing all my weights and balances today in pounds. You're not going to see flight planning today, so it shouldn't really make a difference. We can connect the ground power or the air cart as well. The manual, there are 3 or 4 PDFs that come with this. The manual describes the sim. So the features of the sim that you need to look out for, the little quirks and nuances of the sim. Also has a systems guide and a procedures guide. The systems guide is kind of a very abbreviated FCTM, Flight Crew Training Manual from Boeing. It's not the FCTM, but it takes that format, yeah? So it's all the steps and things that you would need to learn about and read about to learn everything that is in this beautiful aircraft. The procedures manual is an abbreviated FCOM from Boeing. So again, not a proper FCOM from Boeing. It mirrors the FCOM look from Boeing. Strangely enough, though, the procedures book, while it does describe things like cold and dark, that we're going to do in a second, cold and dark startup, it doesn't actually have the checklists in. So that's kind of strange. You reach the end of a section and it will say call before startup checklist, for example, and that checklist is not actually in that manual. You can find them online. We're not going to use them though, because there is only one of me. I don't have a co-pilot or a first officer, so the checklists kind of don't make sense. If you do follow the procedures to the letter, you actually don't need the checklists if you're flying on your own. Obviously, never do that in a real aircraft, kids. That would be bad. So that's the options. Instrument you already saw. Weights and balances, again, borrowed from the 727, and it works really, really well. You can load and remove fuel here. You can use these buttons down here to load and remove fuel as well. You can set full, empty, or random on the fuel setting, passengers and cargo, and change everything to do with the aircraft here. And it's pretty cool. All this stuff then feeds into the V cards here. Now these V cards are great. We had these in the 727 as well. Click on Takeoff. It shows you normal EPR, the power rating 2.15. Our takeoff power is going to be 97.4% N1. Flaps 2, V1 is 135, V rotate is 135, V2 is 141, and here are our climb speeds based on flaps. So you've got all the information you need, but more importantly, that actually sets the bugs up down here. There. You see all these little white bugs? They're all set up based on this. So if I click on landing, you see them jump. If I click back on takeoff, they change again. A really neat feature to automatically set the speed bugs. I like that a great deal. It takes a lot of the guesswork out of the aircraft. It's wonderful. Anyway, internally, Jack has done his usual bang-up job of modelling the detail of this. It looks like an old, battered warhorse, and it really is. The 787-200 is a very old aircraft. He's done a great job at making the bits that shine, shine, and the bits that should look old and grubby, look old and grubby. It's pretty awesome, and realistically, pretty much everything in this cockpit works. There are some things that don't. For example, I couldn't get the marker test to work. You can change the marker light's brightness here, but I just couldn't get the test to work for some reason. But by and large, everything in here works exactly as it should. We're going to see also in this series of videos the use of this, the autopilot system. It is a very basic autopilot. Notice that there's no auto throttle switch. There are no flight director switches. Flight director is on if you move this switch to the right, and that's it. And the auto throttle is really your right hand. You control the throttles. There is no auto throttle. You need to be all over it and managing the power of those massive engines yourself, which is fine and very, very rewarding. Other than that, climb and descent and turn and navigation, VNav, LNav, VNav and LNav, forget about it, doesn't exist. You're doing everything by radios in terms of navigation, and using this over here, altitude hold or IAS hold, to manage climbs and descents, as you're going to see in a second, or not a second, a few minutes when we take off. We are at Innsbruck today in a made-up flight, KLM 123, and we are flying to Geneva. Now, to leave Innsbruck, we're actually going to follow, let me grab my charts here, using Navigraph charts, we're going to follow the Kogel to Juliet departure. So that means taking off on a heading of 081, intercepting the 067 radial to OEJ, and then turning on to 065 for about 20 odd miles, climbing up to 9500 to clear the mountainous terrain that surrounds Innsbruck. Pretty much once we're clear of that, we will turn left, not actually to Kogel, we're going to go to Kilo Papa Tango VOR on 109.6, and then go direct from there to Tango Romeo Alpha, and then direct from there to Foxtrot Romeo India, and that will put us onto the Star into Geneva. That will probably all be in part 2. I don't think this will go to a 3-part video, but you never know. But it's not going to be in this part. This part's going to be primarily cold and dark startup, and then probably taxi. If there is a second part, if there was a split there, it will probably be the takeoff and following that SID, and part 2 or 3, the final part, will be following the star into Geneva. So, let me bring up on my iPad here the procedures. Anybody that has flown the 737NG in FSX will know that the first thing we need to do with a cold and dark aircraft like this is the supplemental electrical power up procedure. So that's what we're going to do first. So using the really quite handy preset views, we're going to go up to the overhead here and go to the next stage of the overhead and make sure the battery is switched on, guard closed. We'll then make sure that the standby power guard is closed, and then up here on the top left that the alternate flaps guard is closed. We'll pop down a little bit, make sure the windshield wipers are off, which they are. And then we're going to make sure that the electrical hydraulic pumps, which are currently off, are off. Our landing gear lever should be down. We should see 3 green lights, which we do. Our weather radar is off. Now would actually be a good time, by the way, to go and connect the ground card. So we'll do that, ground power. We're not going to fire up the APU until we absolutely need to. Now that's an important point. Stuff like this I actually don't like. If I go and connect this, nothing happens. The reason nothing happens is because the parking brake's not set. It would be handy to have a little note here when you click on this. On the right maybe that says set parking brake. But anyway, we can do that. Parking brake is now set. Connect the ground power. So that's connected. If I whiz on up to the overhead now, you will see, whoops, if I can find the right view, ground power available. So we will switch that on, and you'll hear all the cooling fans and everything roar into life. Like so. So the ground power switch is on. We verify that our bus off lights are extinguished, the transfer bus off lights are extinguished, and the standby power off light is also extinguished. They all are. All those lights are off. We're not going to run up the APU just yet, so we'll skip that. And what we can do at this point then is head on down to the fire panels. And we're going to go and run up the tests on here. So I'll just hold this to the left. Engine overheat, we should have a caution, which we do. Great, that's all working. We'll switch this now to fire. Everything's working there as it should. Whiz on over to the right here. Test this one. Wheel well. 3 lights. We have our caution. Our warning lights are all on as they should be. And then we'll go down here and we'll actually do the cargo fire test. This is actually later in the procedure, but we'll do it now anyway. And they're all working. So all the fire tests are now complete. So with all that done, we can actually get on with the preliminary pre-flight procedure. I hate saying that, it's so hard to say. So preliminary pre-flight, we will verify first of all that the oxygen pressure is sufficient for flight up here. Yes it is, and yes it is. And we will check as well that the hydraulics quantity is good, which it is. And we will check that the engine oil quantity is good. These 2 gauges here, which they are. Now I've abbreviated this pre-flight. I've made it a little bit faster by just wiping out some elements that are not necessary because it's a sim. So those of you who are experts, please bear with me if I miss stuff. There's a reason. So let's clear our master caution, and we will pop on up to the overhead once again, and we will check that our thrust reversers guards are closed, service interphone switch is off, passenger oxy switch guard closed, and our pressure indicators, what we just checked already, are good. Our flight recorder we're not going to use, it doesn't work in the sim, and we will do the stall warning. Now here's a bit of a gotcha. The little wheel rotates, but I can't hear the stick shaker. A minor issue. The stick shaker does work. If you do stall this aircraft, oh my god, it lets you know. But it doesn't work in that test for some reason. Next up, parking brake. Well, that's already set, and that puts us into the pre-flight procedure for the first officer. So that will be starting here. Flight controls. Make sure the flight control switches have guards closed, which they do. Flight spoilers should also be guards closed. Our yaw damper at this point needs to be on. Alternate flaps master should be guard closed. Alternate flaps position switch should be off, which is in the middle. We will then whiz on down to the fuel panel. We will make sure that the fuel valve closed lights are illuminated, which they are. That the filter icing lights, they're here, are extinguished, which they are. Our fuel heat switches are off, our crossfeed selector is closed, and all 4 fuel pump switches, or 6, sorry, fuel pump switches are also off. Then we go up again. Now it's actually quite easy to do this pre-flight. You work in strips. You go down this one, down this one, down this one, down this one, and down this one. It's actually very simple once you get the hang of it. I'm taking my time so those of you who are new to the aircraft can see what we're doing. But anyway, up here we make sure our battery switch is guard closed, which it obviously is. Galley switch is on. Standby power switch, guard closed. Generator drive disconnect switches are guards closed. Our low oil pressure lights are on. And our bus transfer switch, guard closed. So we're all good there. Working on the next panel now. Equipment calling switch should be on normal, which it currently is. Emergency lights need to be armed, which again is guards closed. No smoking signs, we will put them right now on. And fasten seatbelts we will put to on. Windshield wiper we already verified is off. Now we go on to the next panel and we make sure that our window heat switches here, all 4 of them are on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pitot static heat switches should both be off. That's these 2. Wing anti-ice should be off. We can test that as well. See the 2 lights come on. We're good. Now the lights will go out. So that is off. Engine anti-ice is also off. Ground interconnect switch should be closed. That's slightly to the left, which it currently is there. And now our hydraulics switches, where the engine hydraulic pumps should both be on, and they are. The electric hydraulic pumps should both be off, which they are. That takes us down here. Everything's looking good here. There's nothing to set here. So we're back up to the top once again into the air conditioning. So we're going to choose the source here to be cabin pressure. Sorry, passenger cabin, sorry, for the temperature reading. We should see the ram door full open lights are on. We'll turn the gasper fan on now. And then we'll start to move, not that way. I pressed the wrong button. We'll start to move down the panel. Pack switches, one of them should be on. The other one should be off. Our isolation valve should be set to auto, which it currently is. Engine bleed air switches, that one and that one need to be on. APU bleed air switch should also be on, and we should see a dual bleed light come up. There it is, right there. Cabin pressurization. We need to set our cabin altitude. Well, we're currently at Innsbruck, which is 1,400 feet up, I think. Yeah, 1,900 feet up. We need to set that to 200 feet less than our destination field elevation. Our destination field is obviously Geneva, which is 1,400 feet, so we need to set that down to about 1,200 feet. So we just click on these here. Now, I'm sure Jack has released an update. I haven't got the update, so this is not the X-Plane 10 way of doing stuff. It's the good old-fashioned click, click, click way of doing stuff, as opposed to a rolly wheel, but I'm quite happy with that. Our cruise altitude today is flight level 190, so we're just going to go out here and drop this down. Whoops. 190, our landing altitude, as we just said, is 1,400 feet. A little bit too much. 1, and we'll just pop that up to 400. Finally, this switch, left is flight, right is ground, should be in the ground position. Now we're into the lights, so make sure all our lights here are off, which they currently are, retracted and off. Runway turn off light should be off, taxi light should be off, engine start switches should both be off. Our position light switch as needed, well, we're actually going to turn that on. Anti-collision light off, wing illumination switch and logo switch off. Wheel well, we don't have a switch for the wheel well lights, so that's good. So now we can run on down to the auto flight panel here. Our flight director, that's this one, should be set. So the mode selector should be off. Altitude hold switch should be off. Pitch command control, this one should be full clockwise. So we'll just click that and make sure it goes all the way to the right. You can press and hold like I'm doing, but it's actually faster to click it. So that is all the way to the right. Marker beacon lights, as I said, you can't test these unfortunately. So I can drop it down and put it into test position, but the lights don't come on. We don't get the sounds. Autopilot disengage light, we will test that. That lights up as it should. Now we'll go ahead and set our altimeter. So back over here in the pilot view, I'm going to zoom out. We'll actually tune ATIS. Now ATIS here in Innsbruck is 126025. So actually let's change our view down to the radios. Now tuning these, again, it's the click, click, click method, but it's actually pretty cool. If you move into any of the knobs, as you just saw, you get the smaller curve, meaning the smaller digits after decimal place. Move it out, you get a larger curve, meaning the main digits. So 126. Just click that down a little bit. Oops, I went too far. 025. So it's going to be 02. There. Nope, that's 20, sorry. Dyslexic Froogle. And we will transfer that into the active and listen.
Innsbruck Crane Written Information Hotel. 600 Zulu weather. Sky conditions 28,000. Scattered visibility 10. Rain. Temperature 3 viewpoint -1. Wind calm. Altimeter 2991. Arriving and departing runway 08. Advise on initial contact. You have hotel.
So some rain, winds calm, 29901 for the altimeter. There are 3 altimeters we need to set. So this one, 29902 currently. So it's pretty easy to drop that down to 29901. This one also needs to go up to 29901. You can click and drag these, but it's not as precise, I find. Let's pop on over to the Copilot view and change this one as well. 29901. Great. Now we go down to the hydraulics view down here. Make sure that the hydraulic system B low quantity light, that one, is extinguished, and our hydraulics quantity is above RF. There is RF there. If I zoom that in, you see there's a little marker that says RF. We are above RF. We are good. Landing gear lever, it's still down. We still have 3 green. Our anti-skid switches, these 2, should be guards closed. Auto brake switch, we don't have RTO, so we just turn that off. And then we verified that our engine reverser lights up here, reverser unlock lights are extinguished, start valve open lights are extinguished, low oil pressure lights are illuminated. They're going to be a little bit higher up. Let me pop back to the overheads. There. And oil filter bypass lights are extinguished, so we're all good on those. Now we can do the engine oil test, which is click and hold that button and watch these 2 needles drop. That works great. We'll do a fuel test as well. If I can remember where the fuel test button is. There it is, down there. Same thing for the fuel. So they're all active. Now at this point in the first officer pre-flight procedures, you'll be doing the fire test. We did all those, so I'm going to skip them. Now we're going to set up our VHF radios. We're not using ATC today. This video is purely focused on this aircraft, not ATC or anything like that. But we do need to set up our radios. Now looking over here, we grab this chart back in. We need to dial in OEJ, that VOR right there, 109.7, and we need to dial in the Rattenberg ADF there, which is 303. So 109.7 and 303. Very easy to do. So 109.7, that's actually already in there. I'll make it over here because I want it on the initial one. So it's there, and that's the active frequency. And then the ADF and DME is down here. We want 303. So 3. Whoops. 0. A little bit fiddly to do this one because there are 3 stages to the knob. As you can see, I'm making a real pig's ear of this. Hang on. 3. My goodness. 03. So that is all set. Our ADFs are set. Weather panel, we'll make sure that is off, which it currently is. Transponder, well, it should be in standby right now, and it currently is. Lights. Let's go ahead and do our light test because this is the start now of the pre-flight procedure for the captain. So the lights test, simply click this up and then look around. Make sure all our lights are on, no bulbs are out. Everything lit up like Christmas. Lights test has passed. So we'll drop that back down to bright. Now the autopilot panel once again. We make sure that our autopilot mode selector, this one, is on manual. Our autopilot heading switch is centered, this one. Make sure that the aileron, there are 2 autopilot switches here, aileron and elevator. They are both disconnected. And our pitch mode selector, this one, is off. Our marker sensitivity switch is on high, so we're happy with that. Now we'll check the standby instruments. Just make sure that everything, basically run through the instruments and make sure they all cross-check. So 1900, 1900, 29901, 29901, and over there 1900, 29901. Everything is looking good. Our artificial horizon here and here matches, so they're all good. Our speed brake lever should be in the down detent, which it currently is. Our reverse thrust levers should both be down. Our forward thrust lever should be at idle. Our flap lever should match the flap indicator here, up, and they are up. Parking brake should be set. Engine start levers, these 2 should be at cutoff. Stabilizer trim cutoff switches don't work. but they are here and they are normal, so we can say that they're good. And now we would normally call the pre-flight checklist, but it would just run through what we just ran through. So pre-flight checklist complete, which of course brings us to the all-important before start procedure. So first we're going to verify the takeoff data. So we will verify once again. Our EPR is 2.15. Our N1 for takeoff is going to be 97.4. So N1 reading is right there, 97.4 is just underneath the yellow mark. I can zoom that in, you can see it. Pretty easy to manage. Flaps 2, 135, 135, 141, so we're climbing really about 161. We're all good, everything's all set. But what we can do at this point is actually go ahead and do what we would do. It's not in the procedures, but I normally at this point do what we would normally do in an NG, which is set everything up. So my initial heading is going to be 081. There. And then we're going to follow a course of 067 degrees. So we'll just wind this up. And the eagle-eyed there will have noticed it suddenly went into 400 degrees. That's an X-plane bug. Don't worry about it. Once you release the mouse, it does put itself correct. I'll show you once again. So if I wind this fast up, you'll see it go into 400s, 500s, 600s. As soon as I let go of the mouse, it resets. So don't worry about that too much. And 065 degrees. Now we have an altitude that we have to climb to avoid all these mountains, which is 9,500. So we're just going to dial that in here. There's 10,000, there's 9,000, and we use the inner knob here to go 9,500, which gives us clearance over the mountains, and I will put this into altitude hold right now. So we're good. Autopilot is still disconnected, manual off, and the flight director is still off, so it's not going to have any effect on us, but I like to have all that stuff set up so I don't forget. Check our fuel at this point. Our fuel looks good. Here, lots of fuel, enough for this trip. It's about an hour and a half flight. HSI heading selectors, well, we just did the heading up there, so that's all good. HSI course selectors, I just did those as well. Altitude alert controller has also been set. And now we would normally do the taxi and takeoff briefing, which I'm obviously not going to do. You saw it, we're following the SID. If anything goes wrong, I'll just edit it out of the video and you never know. So now we can get ready to actually start this aircraft. So up on the overhead, we're going to turn the left and right center fuel pumps on. Actually, not these, because we don't have any fuel there, but we will turn on the aft and forward fuel pumps here. In fact, what we will do is we'll turn these on and we'll fire up the APU. You only need one to power the APU, but we do need to disconnect ground power. So let's do the APU. You click and hold this down and watch the APU temperature gauge. You see it starting to move now. Once it gets a good amount of momentum, like so, we release that switch and let it go back. Now we'll let the APU climb all the way up and stabilize. You'll see it go all the way up to almost the red line and then drop down again as it stabilizes on its temperature. Now it drops down. Now we've got a warning light here saying the APU is on, but the generator is off bus. So we'll put that on bus now, like so, which lets us turn off ground power, and then we can bring up the options here and disconnect the ground car, like so. Over to hydraulics now. Up here, System A hydraulic pumps both go off. System B hydraulic pumps both go on. We verify the System B pressure is at 2800 psi now. You can see it climbing up. And that's about 2800 psi. So back on the overhead now, anti-collision lights, we will turn those on. And we will set our trim for takeoff. Setting the trim for takeoff is actually very easy. Just point down here and click in the green area, and it will reset the trim, as it just did. So trim is set for takeoff. So everything is actually now good to go. We would now normally call for the before start checklist and then get pushback. Now pushback, there is a neat pushback feature built into this, but unfortunately while you're using it, it's very, very hard to do anything else. So we're going to push back and then start. So I'm going to go to an external view. Here it is. And I'll show you how the pushback works. It's pretty cool. Go to options. You need to release the parking brake, which I can do with my feet, obviously. And then click on pushback. Now you're steering it with the rudder pedals. So just going to push back, and then to stop the pushback, we jump back into the flight deck and put the parking brake on. So let's see if I can steer this. I usually do terribly at this. I haven't spent much time in a pushback simulator, so I'm not well practiced, but we'll see what we do. We're going to push back to the left, because we're taking runway 8 today. I desperately don't want to go into the grass, for no other reason than it looks really unprofessional, and the passengers get a little bit concerned. That's looking good. That's probably the best one I've ever done. Thank you, video gods. Oh, look at that. How GSX of me. Parking brake on. We're pretty much on the line. Awesome. Okay, engine start procedure. So back to our overhead. We're going to turn the packs off. We're going to call the start sequence. So start sequence today is 2, then 1. We're going to move the start switch for engine 2 now to ground. Should see N1 rotation. And looking for N2 to hit 20%. At which point we'll feed in the fuel. Come on. Very slowly. Almost there. There's 20%. There's the fuel. Waiting now for a starter cutout. There it goes. Engine 1. Starting engine 1. Flicks that onto ground. Watch for N1 movement. And N2 to hit 20%, which it just did. We'll let those two engines stabilize now. Temperature's coming down nicely. So back over to the overhead. Generator 1, generator 2 switches obviously now go on. 1 and 2. Our pitot static heat switches go on. If I can find them. There they are. Wing anti-ice and engine anti-ice as required. We're not going to use those. I think we're going to be okay today. Flight recorder we're not going to worry about. Packs now both go on. Isolation valve, make sure it's an auto, which it is. APU bleed air switch goes off. And then the APU switch itself can go off. Engine start switches now need to go onto low ignition, which is the equivalent of continuous. We're going to check our flaps now. We had red on that V-Speeds card, flaps 2. Now I'm using levers on my throttle quadrant here for the speed brake and the flaps, which brings me to another quirk of X-Plane. Because I'm using levers, it gets a little bit out of sync. You can actually see here, LE flaps transit. That light comes on when the flaps are moving. They're not moving. It just doesn't like the fact that my lever is at its minimum detent. And normally I have to kind of wiggle that. You can hear me, the clicking is me actually wiggling that lever. And after a while it will actually go out, but it's a little bit weird. I have a similar problem with the speed brake armed, but I set in a null zone, so speed brake arm light is currently off, but it takes no movement at all, just a slight gentle nudge of the speed brake lever to arm the speed brakes. But anyway, let's set flaps 2. There's flaps 2. I actually edited that bit. I couldn't get the flaps to move, and the reason why, I hadn't turned all the hydraulics panel on. So with all that done, let's jump back into the pilot seat and tech recall. No master caution light, everything is good. We are ready to taxi out to runway 08 and take off. I think already those of you who are NG fans will have noticed a lot of similarities between this and the later models of the 737, but also a lot of differences. It takes a bit of getting used to. Anyway, doesn't take a lot of power to get moving. We're going to turn the taxi lights on. Make sure everything else is off. Hit the parking brake off, and let's start moving. You can see the engine spooling up there, and away we go. There is no ground speed indication. You kind of have to gauge it and judge it by eye. Alright, coming up to the hold line, runway 8. When we get there, we'll just cross-check everything again. Feels like a very, very elegant old lady taxiing. Just feels perfect. Alright, so I'm holding the brakes with my toes here. Just going to cross-check. So 1900, 1900. Great. Barometric pressure is 29901 all the way across. Everything is set. Looking down here on the radios. Oh, you know what we didn't do? We didn't set our first waypoint. My first waypoint, as I said, is Kilo Papa Tango, which is 109.6. So I'm going to dial that in on the VOR. So once we actually get clear of the mountains, pretty much at 9,500 feet, we'll tune that radio and fly direct to that waypoint. That puts us on course into Geneva. So everything looks good. Let's say that we were cleared onto the runway and cleared for takeoff. So landing lights on, strobes on. Let's reset my view. There's the zoom, and away we go. Now let me just check the V card once again. 97.4 is our engine setting. We're going to do a very classic takeoff maneuver where we will line up, hold the brakes, increase power to 97.4, make sure it stabilizes at that, and then release the brakes. The load I have on this aircraft actually needs most of the runway, and that's the safest way of doing that. Alright, let's make sure we're nice and square, which we are. Hit the brakes here. Let's bring the engines up to 97.4%. Slowly and gently increasing power. No need to jam them forward. It's a very old plane, and knowing Jack's previous work with the 727, you can cause these engines to blow up. Release the brakes and away we go. So 081, intercepting the radial 065 out to OEJ. Sorry, 067. Oops, I have the wrong course set. Too late. 80 knots. Try to get a good climb speed here. Positive rate gear up. Let's reset this course here to 06 and 7. We'll keep flying runway heading until the needle on the VOR moves. and we will turn to intercept. It's moving now, so we're going to start a very gentle left turn. It flies so well. I love how this aircraft flies. It feels heavy. It feels powerful. I didn't turn. I turned a little bit too much there. Got the right speed now. Yeah, that'll probably do it. We're very close to OEJ, so we're not going to get that needle square on. Just watching my speed, just trimming those down a little bit to keep the speed around 160. Alright, we're actually at an acceleration height now, so we're going to nose down, bring the power back a touch, bring the flaps up. So flaps 1, and as the speed comes up a bit more, retract the flaps the whole way. Now I'm going to set my speed bug here to about 220. You'll see why. And I'm going to set my heading here to 065, sorry. And we will actually engage the autopilot. I want to show you how that works. So engage, engage. We'll flick this down into heading. Come on. I'll flick this over to IAS as well. Master caution, air conditioning, okay. There. So 065 now. We want to be heading 065 for about 28 miles. And we want to be climbing up to 9,500 feet. Now setting the speed bug there and setting IAS hold means the aircraft will pitch to maintain that speed, which is what we want. So climbing at about 230, 240 knots, all the way up to 9,500 feet. So let's turn our taxi light off, make sure everything else is good. The air conditioning warning has gone away. We'll put our flight director here into heading. So you can see flight director lights here are altitude, hold, and heading. Autopilot is also altitude, hold, and heading. So everything you're seeing here from the flight director corresponds to what the autopilot is doing. Not much left to do until we reach 9,500 now, except to admire the beautiful scenery here. I know people are going to ask which scenery I'm using. This is Sim Heaven's mesh, terrain mesh, and photorealistic textures for Innsbruck. They look pretty good. They look actually really, really good. Master of understatement. They look amazing. Look at that. Complete with snow. As we get a little higher up, you'll see. So we are climbing on up. 1,000 to go until we reach 9,500. Then the aircraft will level off and we need to be managing the power to make sure that we don't exceed 250 knots. So as we approach 9,500, I'll bring the power back now. Which obviously slows our rate of ascent. And there's 9,500, so the aircraft will pitch down now. We're pulling the power back, watching the speed. Going to hold around 230 to 240. The speed is climbing. Let it climb all the way up to 240. And then I'll just gently pull back the power levers to hold 240. We're 6 miles away now from OEJ. There's 240. Now I just noticed the ADF needles are not working. The reason why is I haven't turned them on. Not a big deal. Now they're on. And there's RTT, dead ahead. And we are at 9,500. So since we're in heading hold, man, that looks good. Since we're in heading hold, we can just reselect the frequency, the VOR frequency here, to 109.6, our first waypoint. And it's pretty much behind us, 63 miles. So we'll set the course and find out where exactly that is. It is over there. So with us at an altitude now that clears the mountains, we will set a heading to intercept that. It's just dialing around a left turn. Notice how smooth the autopilot is. So manual flying is really nice. The autopilot is very, very nice, very elegant, very smooth, not jerky at all. Beautiful scenery. We'll lock the gear, by the way. Haven't done that yet. There's that flaps LED light, transit light. Whoops, I had it out. Now it came back again. Hang on. It bugs me. This light here. I give up. Move our heading around a little bit more. Let's put us on a nice intercept course to pick up that VOR. Oh, speed's got to wait. 253. Bring the power back a touch. Then as we come out of this turn, I'll initiate the climb all the way up to flight level 190. A bit of a pause there as SkyMax resets all the weather. Pull back the power a bit more, still over 250. That's a good heading. Alright, so let's set up flight level 190 as our cruise. And we will put this now into a full climb. And as we cross 10,000 feet, we'll increase the speed to 280 knots for the climb. We will also now engage localizer hold here. So the aircraft's now waiting to track that localizer. It's climbing. We'll increase our power for the full climb. And away we go. There's 10,000 feet, so we're going to move the heading back up to 280. Sorry, the speed bug, I'm sorry, up to 280. Increase to climb thrust gently. As we start our right turn, I will jump into the co-pilot seat and you can see this beautiful scenery outside. All free scenery, by the way. Still trying to get rid of that flaps light. Not a bug with the aircraft, an X-plane issue. There, it's gone. I got it. We'll set our barometric now to standard, 29902. And you know what? I screwed up. I royally screwed up. I have the wrong course in there. I have the back course set in there. Not a problem. Let me show you how to fix that. Duh. So we're going to change this onto heading mode again. There. We'll just reset our heading. Around to the right. And our course shouldn't be 116. It's going to be more like that one. It happens. Steam gauges. It's sometimes easy to get very confused as to what you're supposed to be doing, as I just did. I'm going to leave that mistake in there just to show you guys. When you do that, and you will do it, I've done it so many times in practicing this video, I've lost count. When that happens, don't panic. Just switch it into heading mode. Reset your heading. And then once you're getting where you want to be, set it back into the localizer. Intercept. Let's take a look out the window. Absolutely stunning scenery. Anyway, that's about it for part 1 of this video. In part 2, I'm not going to split it into 3 parts. In part 2, we will begin our descent into Geneva. I'm going to show you how to fly a fairly interesting star into Geneva and runway with 05 in Geneva. So until then, as always, my name is Froogle. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.